Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's Friday evening. It is 9 o'clock. Time to gather in the music room for a live stream. But first, as always, a little music. Enjoy.
We are all the heirs to Scotland, as a nation proudly stand. We will march beneath her banners to protect our ancient land. In the glens and cities, there on every street are the living heroes no army will defeat. Let our flag mean freedom and not a battle drum. To the world we bid a welcome in 1,000 different ways. We will toast to long lost friendships as we build our better days. In the glens and cities, there on every street are the living heroes no army will defeat. Let our flag mean freedom and not a battle drum. We are all the heroes of Scotland. We're a nation hand in hand. We will march beneath her banners to protect our ancient land. In the glens and cities, there on every street are the living heroes no army will defeat. Let our flag mean freedom and not a battle drum.
Good evening, folks. Good evening, Sir Thomas. I hope all is well in your world. Good evening, Steve, Rory, and Budgie. And for all those coming in, thank you for being here. So anyway, I like to think that, as Steve says, the weekend starts here. So that it sets you up nicely for the rest of the weekend, whatever you do. I always feel in this country, whatever you do, quite often depends on how good the weather is, or how bad the weather is. And I don't think it's safe any longer to say, well, that's one thing we can't control, the weather. Sometimes I wonder about that. Can we? Do we? I don't know. I'm open-minded about it. I had seen an enormous machine in Texas that could, once it started up, it could create rain clouds. But that's not quite what I mean. I mean in an enormous level. Don't know if that's possible, but some people think it is. Some people think it's already harnessed. I don't know. As I say, I'm open-minded on that. I've seen evidence or what claims to be evidence about weather control. Sometimes it looks suspiciously like weather control, but who knows? I don't. Not for sure, anyway. So it's best to err on the side of caution when you're unsure. At least I try to stay that way. Not always possible, of course, but I do try. And the other thing that people who use, good evening, Raymond, people on YouTube tend to overlook, especially, I think, people who are very concerned about viewing figures and numbers and what have you, that the sizes of your audience will depend to some extent on weather. If the weather's good, people generally have a hankering to be outside the house. Same as particular holidays during the year. People tend to want to celebrate and take part on various holidays, whether those holidays are religiously based or not. And so audiences go up and down. That's why I really don't pay that much attention to audience size and viewing figures. There's such a fierce competition going on all the time for everyone's attention. So the figures are bound to go up and down according to these different factors. But on this channel, I do like to think that we're small enough, the channel's small enough to notice when people suddenly go absent. And most of the time it's for very good reasons they do that. But I don't think it does any harm, though, to watch out for those whose names become a regular feature, just in case something is amiss, and that's why they're not on the chat. It's not a question of me being ultra nosy and poking my nose into someone else's business. It's a genuine concern after someone, although unlikely I'll ever meet the person. And when you think and all of that sort of thing, and you realise that all of this is happening without meeting, it's quite a remarkable achievement and says an awful lot, not for me particularly, but for the human spirit generally. Good evening, Skywalker. Oi, oi, you merry band of reprobates. Good evening. Good evening to you, Skywalker. I hope you're feeling all right. You're cozy and comfy and all of that good stuff. And there is Exiled Viking as well. So never doubt my concern over someone who hasn't appeared in the chat for a little while. It is genuine. I noticed, for example, It's a Duck hasn't been here, but not making any of that. He's not missing long enough to be concerned. And it may pop up tonight. And I have no idea if anyone else on other channels do the same thing. I don't know. Any of the other channels that I watch are vastly bigger than mine. So it's probably a lot more difficult to keep an eye on who is there and who isn't there. So I don't criticize anyone who doesn't do it. If you've got 3,000 or 4,000 subs and your average audience size is 100 or 200, then it becomes difficult to know who may have dropped out. Whereas the size the channel is and has been for long enough, it makes it possible for me to do it. That's why I do it. There's that Skywalker slipping into foreign languages already. I always admire people who could speak in more than one language. It's a skill I've never had. I don't have any real ability for foreign languages. I never have had. I couldn't argue with you either way, Skywalker. I have no idea. There's a Woodlander man. Good evening to you, sir. And he's outside all the time, of course. Well, no, he's not outside all the time. But he gets the benefit of the good weather. He also gets the benefit of the bad weather. Good evening, MYT. But not all of us are so blessed. When the good weather ever arrives, and it does arrive, let's be honest, we do get a bit of good weather. My heart goes out for those folk who are stuck in what the term in Scotland generally is high flat or multi-story flats or skyscrapers, whatever you want to call them. My heart goes out to them. There's one in this town. It's probably the worst example of it. It's 12 stories high, surrounded on all sides by heavy traffic. Yeah. And there's nowhere to sit outside for those folk. Good evening, Streaky. A lot of the high flats here are occupied by 50-plus-year-olds. And they've got every reason not to go out, even when the weather's good, because there's nowhere to sit outside. And I should know, I lived in one of these things. Oh my God. I used to live on one multi-story, says Skywalker, 13th floor. Jesus. Holy moly for that. I was on the 6th floor, that was bad enough. What made it worse was when the wee fellow was born. We were there right up until he was a toddler who wanted to be out because he could see and hear other children outside, but the only way he could go out is if we went out or one of us went out along with him, because he couldn't reach the lift buttons to let himself down or up. And then if anything happens, you're 6 floors up. Anything can happen by the time you get to the ground level. Dreadful things. There's Rory giving you a link to the Woodlanders' latest stream, which I've watched, of course. And like a lot of others, I'm waiting somewhat impatiently for the website to go up. I'd like to know the fine points and details of the initiative. Oh, you see, that's another gripe I've got, MYT. Knocked all the high risers down here, says MYT. Quite right. But here's what I've got against it. The town I live in was absolutely butchered back in the 50s and into the 60s. The bulldozers came in and destroyed everything in front of them. High flats went up, which cost a lot of money. And then it was decided that they would come down. But they didn't come down, of course, until the new accommodation was built. So down they came, and the people who lived in the high flats were then forced, as they had been previously, forced out of their tenement houses into these high flats. Now they were going to be forced out of the high flats and into these further out of town matchbox houses that had been built in their place. And all the time, this is public money. This is where my complaint comes from, an objection. Instead of, and we know why, I mean, I know why all this goes on. Instead of building houses that are suitable in terms of living space for, let us be conservative about it, a man, a woman, and say 2 children, enough space for those 4 individuals to live in, to grow in, and be comfortable in. The houses need to be built in a more traditional fashion so that they last twice as long as a mortgage does. At least twice as long as a mortgage. But of course, that's not what's happening. It's all short term. If you think about it, these high flats in this town, and I can only talk about this town, started going up in the late 50s. And most of them are now gone. And I see that as nothing more than an incredible waste of money and resources. And that's part of the problem. But it's been part of the problem for such a long time. And for any fool to build any kind of building structure in Scotland, of all places, with a flat roof, they must be off their bloody heads. Flat roofs in Scotland don't work. They cause nothing but bother and cost and misery for those who are being soaked by the leaky roofs and windows. Skywalker is saying, great views. It was great on summer evenings or summer nights on the veranda facing the northwest. Well, the high flat I stayed in, and most of the ones that I've ever seen, don't have verandas. And the high flats that I stayed in, the windows were locked by the council so that you could only open them so far, supposedly for safety reasons. And the other problem with these high flats is you can never isolate where loud sound's coming from, because there's no sound engineering done in any of these places. Everything is the lowest cost. And for most of the time that we lived in that high flat, Saturday night was a nightmare, because you could guarantee about 10:30 someone would start playing music very loudly. And as I say, where I was, it was Sydney Divine, if that name means anything to you. And this would go on to 1, sometimes 2 in the morning. And there was no escape, didn't matter where you went in the house. You would have thought it was in the next room. It was awful. What's this you're saying, Woodlander? Oh, he's talking to Rory. And me. I'll be giving a launch date next week. It's a lot of work, but I guess you get that. Oh, God, yeah. Absolutely. In fact, that's what I was doing today. Part of the day I was doing that myself. A load of paperwork that came in to do with the party, which I had to get through. And so I didn't get out to sit round the back of the house until it was way after 3 o'clock, I think. So yeah, I know the amount of work that goes in that people never see, quite often never even think about. Exile saying eventually all high risers in the UK will be brought down. They aren't fashionable anymore. Well, there used to be a lame excuse given right up until the 60s. It used to be given out. Yeah, well, the reason we use these concrete blocks, you see, is because of the war. Because of the war, we didn't have people producing good old-fashioned red brick, and so this was expedient, is the word they like to use. This was an expedient answer, cost effective, because it put a lot of people on a very small piece of land. But no account was ever given for the quality of living that could be achieved in one of these places. That was totally ignored. And we're still paying for that. As I say, in this town, anyone who lives in those high flats, they have nowhere to sit in the sun. There's one right in the centre of the town. It's surrounded by a bus terminus and shops and three main roads. There's nowhere to go. There's no well, a little bit of a pavement around there, but that's it. 12 floors of that. 6 flats and a landing. Work it out yourself. Where do these people go if it's a nice day? Well, they can't. There's nowhere to go. The nearest public park is a good walk away, a very good walk away. Dreadful. Absolutely dreadful. That's this you're saying, exiled. That Greenfield Tower that went on fire, they never stopped going on about it. And the number of so-called residents kept rising. And don't forget the mysterious person who left his fridge burned. Who left as his fridge burned. Yeah. There's all sorts of things wrong with that particular story. They have built houses on the ground where the high risers stood, says MYT. Looks better for it. I'll bet it does. So if you haven't had a look at this this initiative launched by the Woodlander, if you've still not done that, I would urge you to go and look at the video that's out. Well, I don't know if it was out today, but that's when I watched it. That's when I got notified. And the one before it. You don't really need to see the one before it, but at least go and see this one. And he's really just emphasizing what he's already said, and he's still working on the. But it's not him personally. It's working on it, but he's got people working on the website, and I'm sure that's a difficult job. Nothing I could ever tackle. And when the website does go up, I would advise people to go and read it carefully and think about what's on offer, what the possibilities are. and then make a decision about whether you're going to become involved or not. And as I've said the other night, we all have to get involved somehow. In some way or other, we have to do something. Sitting, whether you're doing what I'm doing or doing what you're doing on YouTube constantly, is going to achieve nothing. Now, I don't see why you couldn't be involved in many things. You could take part in the Woodlanders Initiative if you think that's a possible positive way forward, and it very well could be. As I say, it will depend on the detail and on the structures, and I'm sure he has it all sorted out, at least in his mind, if not on paper yet. But you could be part of that, and you could be part of a political party like my own party or John Lawrence's party. These can be extensions, these three things. Or you could be part of PA if that's your want. All I'm saying is all of us need to do something. I've already said many times now, I consider myself a dissident. I consider everybody on here a dissident. And if you consider yourself a dissident, then surely you can see that the more things we've got going for us, whether it's short term, medium term, or long term, is all got to be good. That doesn't mean say it's all going to go nice and smoothly. It's all going to work out nicely. I'm sure there'll be hiccups along the way. There always is. Good evening, Honey Monster. Yeah, thank goodness it's Friday. You remember? Crunchy bars. If immigration were reversed, says Woodlander, we could live in villages again. We don't need these people. They add nothing. They all, I suppose, if you look at it from a slightly different point of view, you can say, or some people would argue, well, actually, they do. They do add something. Because I've got a window cleaning business and I just took on another 20 customers because I've got 3 undocumented people who are willing to carry ladders around and clean windows, and I can pay them in pound notes, and that's an end to it. I can increase my profit without increasing my responsibility to anyone who works for me. So from that person's point of view, they may see that as a positive thing. Of course, what they're overlooking in all of this and is the fact that they themselves are obviously corrupted, and they're actually corrupting the people that they're taking on. Now, one of the things that's been argued a lifetime, folks, and honestly, this has been argued for a lifetime. If you take your stereotypical black doctor in the National Health Service, and he has come from some African nation with his diploma to work in the National Health, And that has been the policy for a long, long time now. Does that help us? Does that help him? Does that help his country of origin? Well, it helps him in the sense that he'll most likely get paid a lot more money for being a national health doctor, at least to begin with. That helps us because we've got a doctor that can hopefully repair our ailments. But the loser in all of this really is the country of origin. Because if he's over here, he isn't over there dispensing aid to his own folk. And I would argue that from a moral position, he should be dispensing his skills to his own people. Rather than Europeans. Because the only way countries that are in dire need of doctors and nurses, engineers and scientists are those very countries. And without all those people, they will never be able to dig themselves out of the state they're in. The criticism that's usually thrown at African nations is, well, they're all bloody corrupt, so if you give them money, usually it's a dictator that takes all the money or most of the money. This is the kind of arguments you get. And I'm not saying there isn't a truth attached to that, because there is. But this is the same country. The inhabitants of this country will be the same people who want to come here for a better life. But they would rather stay at home, really, amongst their own folk. That's where their heart is. That's where their roots are. Whatever country it happens to be. So the real answer for that doctor, that hypothetical doctor, really is he should stay in his own country, look after his own folk, and help to organize those who in that country have got a political streak of mind. Because the people who look at our country and desire what we have, as far as I can tell, I could be wrong here, but they've failed to take into consideration that Europe has taken centuries to get to this point. We didn't come out of our ancient abodes one morning and throw off our rugs and say, we can do a lot better than this, and then suddenly it was here. It took centuries to get here. It wouldn't take any African nation centuries to get where we are. It just wouldn't. Because we have learned an awful lot of the hard lessons. We could easily help them do the right thing. And doing the right thing isn't buying guns and bullets from us. Doing the right thing is building up those countries in the way that we did it. Only they could do it much faster because, I say, we can show them how. And that's one of the great tragedies that I see about the African continent. And we don't appreciate just how vast that place is. I mean, it is vast in terms of land size. Absolutely vast. In other words, migration doesn't help anybody. It doesn't matter where they're coming from. It doesn't help the country that they're coming from. And ultimately, it doesn't really help them either. Because usually wherever they go, the migrants, they discover that they want to stick to their own, and therefore they form what we call ghettos. And if you want the proof of any of this, just look at the US. The country's filled with ghettos. Not all black, of course. Because people want to live beside people like themselves. And no amount of forcing will change that. No matter what the dreamy-eyed lefts think, it doesn't work. Never has. It might at some future point, some distant point in the future, it might work. But the way we are now, well, this is the kind of thing I'm talking about, Gavin. My mate got a house in Tilbury, two up, two down, like your own. But it was tiny, 3 by 3 meters, low roof, low is it? Low roof? Yeah, low roof. This is just a waste. It's a waste of material. It's a waste of the men's time for building the damn thing. And it's not satisfactory for any kind of proper living. Houses that were put up in my town area were done in the late 50s, early 60s. They're all the same. They're far too small indoors. What you might call semis back in France, stuck to one another. Yeah, fine. But when you go inside, it's small. It's barely 12 foot wide. Barely. It's about, the average is about 11.5 foot wide. Lower ceilings. Nowhere to eat a proper meal because there's no space to house a table and, say, 4 chairs. Kitchen's a galley kitchen. The bedrooms are functional. Sometimes it's functional just. And okay, they have got WCs and baths. That's how they were built. But for actually living in, no. Absolutely no. These houses were at least 1 room short. At the very least 1 room short. Every house should be built, in my opinion, with a room exclusively designed for at least 4 people, 2 adults, 2 children, or 4 adults. A table in each with a chair so they can eat proper food on a table, on a plate, ideally away from a television. And that's a view I've had for, well, since I saw these, my granny went into one of these houses. Her was slightly better, but not much. Well, this idea about buying land opens up, as I've said already, all sorts of possibilities. All sorts. Good evening, Treble M. Sorry I'm late. No need to apologise. I was waiting for John to start the stream, and I managed to nod off. I'm here now, though. So good evening, John, and everyone on tonight's stream. Thank you very much, Treble M. Oh, it's very easy to nod off. I've got to be careful of that as well as 9 o'clock comes round. 5 stories should be the max. Well, I've told you this before. I'll repeat myself. According to the professional firemen that I have spoken to over the years, they cannot save anybody above the 6th floor. And most of the time, they wouldn't even try. Most of the time, they wouldn't even try because it's too damn dangerous for them. So what about all the children and the old folk that are above the 6th floor? Eh? Now, in the high flat that I lived in, it had, on every landing, there was one apartment, specially designed for old folk. Now, I was never in it. I was never in any of these old folks' apartments. So I'm going to make a wild guess and assume that it had 1 bedroom. That's why it was designed for old folk to go in, assuming there was only 1 person. Well, that's even more hideous when you think about it. I think that's more hideous. Because now you're totally dependent on that lift. And I can tell you from experience that they don't always work. So quite often where I lived, you would see people struggling up the stairwells. And if there was somebody coming down, that was you. You had a jam. You had to get back to the next entrance to the stairwell, go in, and let the person pass so you can go down. And quite often you'd see not just women, men and women clumbering up the stairs with folded prams and babies and toddlers and bags of groceries. It was awful. Absolutely awful. We had that every night, every Saturday night, MYT, for years. And obviously, I complained to the so-called responsible person, the caretaker, but he would just shrug his shoulders and say, well, which flat did it come from? Well, as I said, you can't identify the flat, even if you can see the light on. Because when you get up to that flat, that landing, it sounds as though it could come from any of the houses and you don't know. And then, of course, they had this communal washing facility with machines and all that. And half time it didn't work. People didn't look after that properly. October, lived in a hotel that doubled as residential for 4 months in Madrid. That was piss, I can safely say. Yeah, well, It's either a hotel or it isn't. 42. There's a link for 42. Don't forget he's on tomorrow night, late. Usually starts about 10:30. Tomorrow night, Sensim's on with Bonnie Ladd, and I see Sensim's on with Toffee on Sunday. 9 o'clock start. So plenty there if you're not away from the computer or your gadget, whatever it is you're using. Well, believe it or not, MYT is saying, look at the Red Road in Glasgow, John. How did that work out? You know that my estranged daughter lived in that monstrosity. She had a baby at the time. Or should I say, her daughter was a baby at the time. It was a nightmare inside, filled with doors and corridors. And of course, people being people, there's prams sitting outside doors, bicycles parked. What you would expect from people living. But you could never ask a fireman to go in there in the smoke and the dark, because electric's the first thing that goes, and try and rescue people. And all you'd get is fear and panic running wild through these endless corridors and doorways. Complete and utter disgrace ever to be considered. Yeah, but getting back to the initiative from Woodlander, time will tell. It always does. It doesn't sound a lot what he's asking for. He's not asking it for himself, of course. He's asking it for all of us. We'll see if it's achieved. Red Rose flats are thankfully all gone now. He's talking about the Red Road flats. Was a complete eyesore and a blight on the landscape. Yeah. Awful thing. Absolutely dreadful. But they have such dreadful things down in England as well. It's all about cost and containment. That's what it's all about. Cost and containment. And not for living, not for any quality of living. You live in one of these places, what you can best do is you can make food in it, you can eat your food in it, you can go to bed and sleep in it, you can have a bath in it. But for actually any kind of meaningful living, no. No matter what you do in one of these high flats, folks, it will never give you a sense of home. I know that's completely subjective, and so it should be. But you will never get it, no matter how much time you live in a high flat. It's just not achievable. And there's a link for Scott's Armour. I don't know what his plans for getting back into streaming. I think he's going to take his time about it. I don't know exactly. I'm not privy to that. Perhaps he hasn't even concluded himself on it. Take it bit by bit, I should think. Rory, my sister-in-law lives in a high-rise in Lower Manhattan, New York. Well, what the hell does that mean in New York? Is that something like 30-odd flats? I don't know. She witnessed 9/11 from her balcony until there was so much smoke and debris she had to close the doors. Yeah, absolutely. And don't forget all that asbestos in there. People tend to forget about that. Some of these things that they show you in movies, inside a so-called tenement block, when they're monstrosities, they're barren and devoid of humanity. That's my opinion. But I'm dead against these things, and have been. Well, that's what I've said, Woodlander, and he's agreeing with me. I think we need both. Political organizations will be needed, absolutely. Like I said the other night, if you have one person on a council, and that council has jurisdiction over some piece of land that the initiative is going to buy or proposing to buy, having that one person on the council could be very valuable in terms of inside info. Perhaps if there's anything that needs to be voted on. I don't know the ins and outs of buying land, but it could be very useful. But even better if we controlled the council. But if we had 1, 2, 3, however many, but at least one person from one of our parties on that council, could make all the difference. That's why I say everyone needs to do something. And if that isn't your thing, the politics, then just simply being a dissident is something. But it has to be shown in some sort of public way. In other words, you have to take your presence of mind out into the public and share it with others. I know that's not easy. I know it's not. Never thought it was. And it's not everyone that can do it. It's not everyone that's suitably placed to be able to do it. It's DJ here. I never know it's DJ coming in. Good evening, Scott's Armour. Thank you for your email. DJ, can I have some cultural Gaelic reggae music tonight? Original, colourful and pure. Do you know, Scott's Armour, you know where I am, you know where I live in the general sense. There used to be a school here, Highlanders Academy. Notice the title, folks. Highlander Academy, where Gaelic was spoken by teachers and pupils. We had Gaelic churches. The buildings are still there. I could take you round and show you them. There's storage places now for furniture. It closed a long time ago. But we had a thriving Gaelic community here at one time. Partly due to the clearances, partly due to the industry that used to be here. The industry attracted people from all over. My own relations on my mother's side were originally all from the East Coast. Not quite as far up as Aberdeen, but along that eastern coast. They followed the fish on shore and gradually ended up down at Leith in Edinburgh, and then gravitated here for jobs, the industry that was here. And there's another link from Steve, a telegram for Woodlander. Streaky saying we could have a village each at the Woodland. Well, again, it would depend on the land, how much of it. And again, you would need to exercise prudent common sense. And I think that if this can be done on the scale that no doubt the Woodlander has imagined, some of that land could be left fallow the way it's bought, simply for preservation and recreation purposes. And actually, because of this initiative, I'm actually beginning to think how that can be utilized in a political sense for our benefit. Because if this is done right, now again, I don't know the cost of land, and I don't know what can be bought for how much. But if you started buying up these pieces of land in the way that Woodlander has done in his imagination at the moment, how long would it take for us as a collective, as a people, before we owned, in that capitalistic sense, own large chunks of land all over the country? So that got me thinking, well, if my own party ever came to power, even in Scotland, what would prevent us as a government in Scotland saying to the people, you know what, folks, we're going to use some of your tax money because it's yours, and we're going to buy this estate wherever, right? Only it's not going to be owned by the government, this third-party government, this state. Is going to be owned in the same manner as the Woodlander suggesting, in a very capitalistic way, not in a a more abstract political sense. And there is a big benefit there if this can be done. Now, I don't know if it can be done, but this is where my mind has developed into. Well, if you could do that, if it's possible to do that, then it could never be sold unless the people who own the land want it to be sold. And that's the way we should own all the national assets, in the same manner as that, so that it wouldn't matter who comes to power. They can't stab us in the back by selling it at some future point, when all the originators are dead and buried. If you follow what I'm saying, that the country then really would belong to us, but in that manner, not in that intellectual abstraction called the government or the state, because the government can always change, usually does. But what if the water of Scotland, for example, hugely important asset, was owned in the same manner as Woodlanders' land is, and so wrapped up legally that it couldn't possibly be sold off, as it has been. Of course, all the assets are gone. They're all sold off to foreigners. And that's part of the problem, that the people of the country don't understand or realise when politicians speak in this highfalutin language what is meant by a nation's assets. The land itself, water, the ability to make electricity in this modern era. To actually own, properly own the transport system, so it can't ever be sold off. If you just gave some 15 minutes or less thought to how the railway system was sold, or the better still, the telephone system. The General Post Office was built from the ground up using public funds. It was a socialist idea. It served the people. It was built to serve the people. And it did for a long time. Even during the war, the mail got through to the trenches, believe it or not. In that horrible First World War, the mail got through. Imagine how vital that was for those young boys in a trench, and they get a letter from their mum and dad, or their girlfriend or their wife. That was all built by public money. And I remember, because I'm old enough to remember, Michael Heseltine was the agent of destruction for the post office. He spent his entire political life doing everything he could to get that out of the hands of public ownership. Not because they wanted the postal service. No. What they wanted was a telephone service. Because all the wiring had been done, all the connections had been made, all the money and Labour had gone into it, it was ripe for a takeover. And that's what happened to it. It was taken over. But if that one institution had been constructed in such a way that it was quite clear that the ownership of the General Post Office belonged to everyone who was named on the voter list, say, everyone in the country was a part owner, something of that nature, it would have been impossible then to sell it off. And so all that development into what has now become BT, all that profit would have come back to us, the people who created it in the first place. Now, I'm not saying that this is all possible, but it certainly stimulated my thinking along these lines. Because one of the important things that I took from these two videos that he's made, now he was talking, big money, of course. It wouldn't be too long before that initiative, let's just call it the initiative. We won't ever forget the founder, but let us call it the initiative. But it wouldn't take too long for that initiative to become a major landholder in this country, our country. People who were named in that organization would be part of the ownership, which would make it incredibly difficult to sell it unless that's somehow built in. I don't know. We have to wait for those details. But you see my point? It's a slightly different approach from the old way of doing things. And the old way of doing things was my party comes into power in Scotland. I'm the First Minister now. And I decide, or we decide, the party, that we're going to take back the railway systems into public ownership. Now, that's all fine and dandy up to this point. But now what is important is, how is that structured? How is that new entity to be structured in such a way that it cannot ever be sold off again? Because public transport should be an asset of the country, along with water and the ability to make electricity. Likewise with hospitals, likewise with nursing homes. There are plenty of institutions that are presently in private hands, raking in millions of public money, because all this is funded by public money in one way or another, whereas it should be invested back into these particular areas of endeavour and not salted away for somebody to lie on a beach somewhere. Now, I'm making it very simplistic, I know that, but in practice, it would require all sorts of legal minds. MYT, the sheeple will not stray and think for themselves. A globalist idiot who cannot define what a woman is will be our next PM Starmer. Yeah. Well, he's a globalist, we know that, of course. Labour Party is not what it was. Keir Hardie and people like John McLean are turning in their graves at this very moment. Well, that's another area that needs readjustments, without a doubt. But you know me, I stick to what is politically correct in the proper sense of that term. I only ever talk about illegal aliens. To talk about migration in any form, in my opinion, on a political level, I speak as the leader of the party here. I couldn't make any guesses about what a policy, a good, positive policy would be regarding migration until I was in power. And the reason I say that is because before you need to be in power before you can have access to the proper facts and figures of the thing. And once you've got that, once you've got the real facts and figures there before you, you can then start putting together proper policies to deal with such things. And that's why it's a very difficult subject to talk about, because I don't ever talk about what's supposedly legal migration. I much prefer to talk about illegal aliens. That's much more straightforward. Anyone who has arrived here illegally should be sent packing to wherever they came from. And I take it Streaky knows what he's talking about when he says we are the third most populated island in the world. Not good, folks. And nothing to stop it, and no one is inclined to stop it. Nobody cares to stop it. They don't even talk a good talk anymore. They just talk. Shortbread is good, isn't it? I can eat that to a band coming home. MYT is saying the National Health Service owes me a fortune. The money I have paid in to the service I have needed or received a scam. Our own doctors hate us, says Gavin, and our poisoned mannerisms. I'm not so sure that I would totally agree with what you're saying. I'm sure there are doctors who do have those attitudes. But I wouldn't make a sweeping statement like that myself. Well, there's a link from Rory here to Richard Forbes. I find I do watch him myself, Rory and folks. I do watch this Richard Forbes. But for my taste, I find him too often very unduly simplistic. That's my own thoughts about it. Oh, there's the man himself, Toffee. Good evening, Toffee, everyone. Good evening, everyone, he says, lurking and listening. Hope you all have a great weekend. Yeah, you too, Toffee. I see you're on with Sensum on Sunday, 9 o'clock. Hope that goes well. MYT is saying Northern Europeans had to work harder just to survive our winters. Africans have never had those hardships. The sun always shines. Can't really argue that, can you? No, there's Ragnar now. Good evening, Ragnar. And he'll likely be on Sunday. I think I've got a notification from him at the moment as well. Right, I've got a lot of material here, so I better bring some of it on. It's not all political, of course. Well, I think this is a universal exile. I do. I think this is a universal. I prefer my own people. I think that's a universal statement. As I say, anything I say about this initiative, I have no doubt the Woodlander has already thought of it and ironed out any wrinkles that he has spotted in it. I just work on the simple principle. If I can see wrinkles in it, then the person who came up with it also must be able to see these same wrinkles. But in his case, he will have given it a lot more thought before he ever made that first announcement. Well, that sounds great. That sounds great, Steve. The Woodlander. Oh, the Woodlander, Paca, and Steve are taking the kids camping in the woods soon. Teach them a bit of bushcraft. Great. Wayne's will love that. That'll be a hoot for them. Be a hoot for you as well. Terrific. That's what we need. More of that kind of stuff going on. And don't take too many gadgets with you. That's all I'd say. Exactly. Bin the bloody telly, says the Woodlander. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And newspapers. My friend in Glasgow assures me with a high degree of confidence that the youngsters in the school, not one of them use anything but their telephones. That's where they get all their information from, through their phone. And some people will say that the 30 and under don't bother with newspapers either. And I think that's all a good thing. By and large, it's a good thing. Again, this can all be changed, MYT. The money they want for modern houses, it's unreal. You're absolutely correct. But when you're at the mercy of the money changers, there's nothing you can do. It's a take it or leave it. That's why they're in that business. As I've said, and I've said this, oh gosh, I don't know how long I've been saying this. Long before I ever appeared on YouTube, I can tell you that much. This housing business, as I say, I saw it for myself when my granny first moved, and she first moved, and my granny had moved before I'd left school. So I left school in 61, so my granny was already in one of these new houses. And of course, there was improvements from what she had. She finally had an inside toilet with a bath. That was a huge improvement for her. 2 bedrooms, which at the time was fine because she only had 2 children in the house at the time. And it was adequate for their living space. It was built slightly better than what was to come later. But she was out in the middle of nowhere. I say out in the middle of nowhere. I say that because that's how I feel about it. But for the first time in their lives, they needed public transport to go anywhere. That had never happened to them before. They had lived in this one tenement, brought up. It was like my granny had two separate families. She had my mother, who was the oldest, and then there was a younger sister, my auntie Famie, and then my uncle David. That was the 3 of them. And then there was a long spell. And she had another daughter when she was close to 40, and then a son after that. So there were like 2 separate families. But that first part, my mother and her sister and her brother, were all brought up in a room and kitchen, an attic room and kitchen with an outside toilet that they shared with 2 other families. And somehow they managed that without any problem. Well, I'm saying without any problem. I don't know. I wasn't there. But they lived, survived, and brought 3 children up in that. And a 4th, to be honest. By then, of course, my mother and auntie had left the house. They had got married. I was born, so they got through it. But the quality of the houses, you could see they were poor. Single plasterboard walls, no insulation, no sound reduction, nothing. It's a hobby horse of mine, this business about working class housing. I can't imagine why BT BTW, everyone. I was moaning about my TV being broke, says Toffee. I got a 32-inch telly for £150. Bargain. My neighbour's got a huge TV screwed onto the walls, onto the fireplace wall. Huge it is. You see it from the street. See, your house is deceptive, Treble M. I mean, from looking at it in that video that you sent me a couple of years back, you sent me that video where your house appears in it. From the outside, it looks like a great townhouse. But you're saying I would love to have a walk-in pantry, a room for washing clothes and drying them, plenty of cupboard space, etc. I have none of them. Well, my house is the same. If you saw my house from the outside, like Skywalker has or Exile Viking has, when they see that, they think I own the whole thing. Because it looks like one house from the outside. It really does. But it was purposely built for two families. And there you go. And I've got similar problems about storage. My front room has turned into a storage area. I don't use my front room anymore. I've got a government computer living in my front room. It's been there since the lockdown. Bought by public money. It was used by my son for a while when he was not allowed to go to the office. But it's been lying there ever since. There's not even a whisper about it going back. It's not even used. And everyone who worked in that office was issued one of these computers. Multiply that across the country and you get some idea of the money that was wasted. Our money, of course. It's just totally unbelievable. But what can you say? Not a lot. This has become a bit of a mantra, this. Clive then, Clive now, Clive forever. Are we talking about no chance here? Well, that's the impression that I've always had, Woodlander, that you do think big. But if you don't think big, you don't get anywhere. I'm afraid I think big, he says, and usually it works. It's how I ended up rattling around a 4-bedroom, 2,000 square foot cabin. I believe there's only 2 of you, isn't it? It's you and your wife. I better put some of this stuff on and I won't get through any of it. So let's have a look at some of these videos. You may have seen this. I took this from Bonnie Lad, so you may have already seen the thing. But I'll put it up anyway. It's shocking enough. I'll let it run a couple of times so you get the full message here.
Around 3 p.m. on Friday, May the 12th, two teenagers were in Laurel Park when they were approached by a man. He tried to engage them in conversation before grabbing one of the girls and touching her over her clothing. She then shouted at the man, before both girls ran away. Thames Valley Police is now appealing for witnesses following the sexual assault. The man is described as Arabic, around 20 to 30 years old, around 5 feet 5 inches tall, with short black hair and a long black beard. It has been reported that he spoke in broken English. Investigating Officer PC Danielle Scott, based at Loddon Valley Police Station, said, "We are investigating this sexual assault of a teenage girl by touching." At around 3 p.m. on Friday, May the 12th, two teenagers were in Laurel Park when they were approached by a man. He tried to engage them in conversation before grabbing one of the girls and touching her over her clothing. She then shouted at the man, before both girls ran away.
MYT is saying councils are where to start, bottom up, grassroots. Nobody is interested though. That's my approach. That's the party approach. MYT. That's what I was saying about earlier. It might prove in the medium term to be shown to be the smart move, especially if this land buying initiative takes off. It could be very useful and helpful to have someone on a local council where you're going to buy the land or who has some kind of control over it. And even if it doesn't, there's many, many things you can do on a local level that can help the quality of life for our folk. That is the policy. Although you hear me talk often about, what I would do if I was First Minister or Prime Minister, that's just to show you that I have a vision for the country. And it helps me to think out particular ideas. Otherwise, I wouldn't use it. But I have no expectation that my party or any of our political groups are going to come to power anytime soon. I realise that, but where we can gain lots of ground quietly, without much effort in some cases. England has these things, as far as I am aware, called parish councils. You can take involvement in that, become a member of the council, help to guide things in the way that you want. School boards, get involved with local schools, become a board member, have a say in the material that is being taught. Show your complaint and your disapproval. And that's being done productively, because all these boards and councils, God help me, are bureaucrats. They like to keep records, which means that all these protests that you make in these councils and boards becomes part of the public record. And this is all important. You may not think it is, but it is. Because it separates the wheat from the chaff. You know then who's not for our people by how they vote on particular issues. That's why it's important to become part of all of that. I'll let this.
Thames Valley Police is now appealing for witnesses following the sexual assault. The man is described as Arabic, around 20 to 30 years old, around 5 feet 5 inches tall, with short black hair and a long black beard. It has been reported that he spoke in broken English. Investigating Officer PC Danielle Scott, based at Loddon Valley Police Station, said, "We are investigating this sexual assault of a teenage girl by touching."
And to say I took that from Bonnie Lads, so you may have seen it before, but it's just another. It's terrible for me to use this language. It's just another example. There shouldn't be any examples. Good evening, Censor. We've got 6 slackers, he says. Good evening, Ian. Hope you're doing all right. I hope you enjoyed your walk this morning, that 5-mile walk. Oh, you might have cycled there, of course. Oh, God. That takes me back. Exile Viking is saying, "I'm polishing brass objects whilst I listen." And I love the smell of brasso. That was a job my mother used to do on a Sunday. They're the brasses. Of course, John always had to help. I don't do anything like that. If you come to this house, if you ever were to visit me, as Exile knows, and so does Skywalker, you'll be looking at years of dust. I don't say that proudly. You're absolutely right, MYT. Clyde built used to mean something. Now it means nothing because we don't build anything. Nothing's built here anymore. And that's what I'm saying. That's what we have to protect against. I'm back to this again. We have to protect against, in the future, that if we do anything such as buy land, such as get some real authority and power, we have to use it not just productively and positively, but creatively. To use it in such a way that it can never be betrayed by anyone in the future. And there has to be legal ways of tying it up. It's an absolute disgrace that all the water that we use in this island, and I know I'm talking about the UK, and I do always include Ireland in that. But you think about the drinking water, the very thing that we all need as human beings. We don't own it. It's all sold off. Asset stripping of a nation. And that can't be allowed to happen again. And the only way I see to protect that is through the politics, to get power eventually and take back control in such a manner. And it might mean this kind of approach that Woodlander's talking about, rather than the ways it was done before. It seemed awful easy to me from the outside how easy it seemed to be for the Thatcher government to sell off GPO. And I use that one particularly because it was built from the ground up. The railway system was built in a slightly different manner. So it's not quite as straightforward to use as an example because they started as private enterprises, but not the GPO. It was always publicly funded, publicly owned. But as I say, in a very abstract political sense, it was owned by the people. The government owned it. Well, as we all know, the government doesn't own anything. It has no money. All the money is ours. And that means, of course, that all the debt is ours. The debt that they create. Don't tell me you've got 7 dogs. Goodness sake. The 7 dogs would disapprove. That's like Toffee. He's as bad. He's got, well, not as bad, but he's got a lot of dogs as well. My sister's got 3 cats and a dog. I'm laughing at the jokes. Seven, yeah, 7, Ian. Some people are not satisfied about having 1. Streaky. John Davidson, that remark was about if the immigrants were deported. Right, okay, Doc. I take your point. Again, that seems a straightforward thing to be able to do. But I don't think it's going to be that straightforward. Illegal aliens are a different case altogether. They haven't got any rights or shouldn't have any rights in any country that they land themselves in. After all, if the USA can stop a world figure like Charlie Chaplin from coming back into America, I'm sure we shouldn't have too much bother removing illegal aliens from our country. But I could be wrong. Yeah, we'll need to have Ian back on again. I need to get in touch with Ian. Get him back on. That's the spirit. Amanda, go out and have a nice time. I'm out with my friends tonight, my mates. Hen do. It's our second time round. Catch up with you all next time. Well, have a good time. I'm sure you will. MIT is saying, do you think these tyrants would leave us alone? Doubt it. Well, again, I don't want to say too much here, MIT, because if you've had that thought, I'm going to assume that Woodlanders had that thought. And if he has had that thought, he must have, well, maybe not must, but I'm going to assume reasonably, I think, that he will have some form of solution. Oh, there you go. There's an answer for you right there. Even Mark Collette said on his PWR stream, the BNP would have been much better off spending the $5 million they raised on buying land than putting it into activism. Well, there you go. There you go. Now, I don't know much about land. I really don't. But I would suspect that 5 million would buy you a sizable chunk or chunks of this island. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of cash. But as I say, I don't want to say too much. This is not my project. I'm only reacting to the idea. And I can't imagine that the Woodlander has not had all of these thoughts. Well, in a sense, it is activism. I would say, Ian, buying the land would be the activism. Yes, it would be. Of course it would. Handing out leaflets is activism. Being on a school board is activism. Talking to your neighbour whenever you can is activism. Anything that we do that is positive is activism. It doesn't necessarily need to involve money or money spent. We have to think in different ways, more creative ways. I hate to use the expression, so I ain't going to use it. You know the one I'm talking about, revolves around boxes. You're all busy talking amongst yourself. Maybe I should shut up and just let you go on there. Well, again, I'm trying to keep away from all that sort of stuff myself, MIT. They would just manufacture another Waco, and our stupid brethren would believe it because the BBC told them so. Yeah, I remember that Waco when it was happening. That was before the light went on, of course, in my own head, a long time ago that. I don't know Streaky, to be honest. I really don't know. I know he was quietly paid by the oil companies. Beyond when he was in Parliament, he regularly spoke for that interest group. But as to that, I can't answer. I mean, he regularly broke all their own taboos in that House of Commons and nothing happened to him. But he was the one that was spending his whole life attacking the GPO and constantly badgering for its destruction. Anyway. Oh, there's William. Good evening, William. I've started watching that film. The Warriors, The Wanderers. Anyway, let's see what else I've got here. Have a look at this. It's short. I'll let it run a couple of times so you get to see it properly. It's a colorized old film that's been regulated so it doesn't appear to be jerky. It's all been fixed out and colorized. Have a look. You must not happening today. My God, there would be lawsuits everywhere. Even the ladies are getting involved in it. It seems quaint, doesn't it? And I bet there's nothing on you. If you went back in time, that would be nothing on you. You're all saying it's a classic, this film, is it? Must have been a classic long before my time, because I don't know anything about it. So there you go. A quaint little bit of film. Alibi. Only look into. And if we were all honest, our hearts tug for that kind of life. It appears to be carefree with us. There you go. Nostalgia. What can I say? Well, there you go. It's not the wrinkles. It's the 700 messages from people wanting to get involved. That's hard work. Well, that's quite amazing. You've had that response. That's really amazing. That's great. Even that, little as it is, right, gives rise to optimism. Does it not? I think it does. Well, that should mean then, Woodlander, in theory, you should have no problem getting that 100 that you were talking about. Because maybe it's you. I suppose I'm different because I lived part of my life through that era. I see it differently. Ian is saying, worst thing about a relapse is climbing back on the wagon like Groundhog Day. I hope that doesn't mean you, Ian. I hope you're not referring to yourself there. So many have come in since I started here. I haven't said hello to everyone. Pressure Drop, there's one. Good evening, Pressure Drop. I did say hello to Sensum and Toffee. Yep, 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 yep. MYT. Things have improved, no question. But part of me thinks it is the evil ones dropping some breadcrumbs on us. There is no fight in us anymore. Was that the plan? I have no doubt, MYT, part of the overall strategy has to be to nullify any population if you want to try and control that population. You have to neutralize. And as I said before, I've discussed it over a lifetime with my old friend Jerry, who's sadly no longer with us. I say sadly, I'm sure he's quite happy where he is. But just look at what happened to the pubs. When I first started, when I left school in 1961, pubs had remained more or less unchanged. There were places where men went on the weekend. Normally on the weekend, you had your regulars that went in and on the other days. But for the most part, working class men went drinking on a Friday and a Saturday night. Sometimes they went for a couple of pints before the football game on a Saturday, when it was once played on a Saturday. But as my lifetime has rolled on, the changes began to appear, and all for the worse. The advent of lounges, more expensive than public bars, where you could take your girlfriend or wife for a quiet drink. The idea then was to encourage women into drinking and drinking in public. Then jukeboxes, that destroys or partly destroys conversations, but especially televisions and jukeboxes. The whole intention of that was to destroy conversation, because men only ever talk about three things, really: football, women, and politics, not necessarily in that order. And where did they do all that talking? In pubs and social clubs. So they had to go, or they had to be changed in such a manner that they were no longer used in that way. And that's exactly what's happened. You can add on if you like, but it's not necessary. Bringing in the smoking ban eliminated about 40% of the drinking public in a pub. Some smokers will tolerate what's left. People like me don't. But that's just one step. All the other steps came first. I've seen bars where men have censored themselves simply because there's women in the bar. They cut down their swearing, they lower their voices. So they're adapting to the fact that women are there. No, I'm not saying that women are involved in that. I'm not saying that at all. But that's where the hotbed of political discussions used to take place, was in a pub or a social club. But a lot of these social clubs were attached to industries. And when the industry goes, the social club dies a slow death. And I'm only giving you a potted view of it. Jerry and I used to talk about that all the time. It wasn't uncommon around here. Not all the pubs did it, but there was a couple pubs where if you went in a Friday or a Saturday night, some people, once they got a couple of drinks in them, they would just start singing. And people would join in, and before you know it, there'd be a sing-song going. Just much like I experienced in Ireland when I went there. Can't even imagine that happening now. I don't even know if dominoes is still played. I know darts is, and there's a league and all that for dart playing. But dominoes was quite common in pubs. So was card games, believe it or not. that's one of the reasons why I first came on, was to tell you from a first-hand life that this is the way things were once and how they were slowly changed over my lifetime, and that's not a long time. And again, one of the other major changes, especially in pubs, I expect social clubs were the same, although I was never a member of any social club. It used to be all barmen. Women never worked in pubs. It was seen to be beneath women to frequent pubs. Some pubs had what they called a little snug. And that would be a place where older women, often widows, would go there and have a quiet drink in the snug, just the women. Be lucky if there would be room enough for 6 women. And some of the pubs had them. They're all gone now, of course. Snugs. I don't know about England. It's been such a long time since I've been in England. Well, that's what I'm talking about down the stairs, Toffee. 32-inch isn't really a big telly, I know that. I've seen ones look like a cinema screen. That's what's down the stairs, something like 54 inches or something. It's huge. It's ridiculous because, believe it or not, there's a ratio between a television screen size and the distance that you should be away from it to view it. And I can assure you the house down the stairs, being the same size as up here, the room isn't big enough for a 54-inch television screen. It's too big. But who am I? Anglo-Saxon. Good evening, Anglo. Nice to have you with us again. Is Bass in here? I never saw him coming in. Oh, you must be, you're talking to him. Good evening, Bass. I haven't seen your name. I'm going to assume it's here somewhere. I'm all stairs, John. Tall rooms, right? I'm just going on that brief. I did freeze it, of course, when your house came up. It looked from the outside, my imagination again, you see. Well, there you go. Size of the screen's got nothing to do with it. Sound quality is often overlooked. You get upstairs to bed, Ian. So I hope you sleep well when you get to sleep. It actually belongs to the civil service. Travel in, sell the council's computer and spend the money. You wouldn't get it sold. They can't do anything. It's got built-in software, especially for the job that my son does within the civil service. It's a made-to-measure job. with made-to-measure software, which he assures me doesn't work properly. And I'll take his word for it. But it's sitting in that front room. And I say, you multiply that by the millions, because it will be millions of computers. And cannot imagine what the top cost of all that is. But what the heck's only public money, isn't it? Why worry? Television weighing 10 stone. I tell you, folks. All right, you can back to that piece of video, yeah. They will probably charge the girls with a hate crime. Probably, wouldn't be surprised. I don't know anything about Jimmy Savile pressure drop. I can't answer. Don't know anything about him except he was he was on BBC and ITV a long time. That's a whole nother subject. That's when I got rid of I stopped paying a license. Shortly after that I disconnected the television altogether. Well, that was shown to be the case in the USA. My mate said you should never get a smart TV because the government can watch you wanking. I wonder if that's true. Well, it came out. It was disclosed a couple of years, but a good few years back now. They have listening and looking devices. MIT is making a reasonable statement, which I reasonably agree with. We are decent people. For the most part, we are. But we have let or not seen the scum who have gained power. But make no mistake, they are cowards and freaks who will crumble when confronted. Just look at them. I agree with you. I do. As I've often said, it's a short step for somebody like any of them. Pick any one of them. David Cameron, anybody. Starmer, any of these characters. It's a short step for them to become Prime Minister. It's a much larger step for somebody like me or you to become Prime Minister. And some will argue amongst us that it's not possible to make that step. And they may well be right. They may well be right. Perhaps it is. But I say we must try because we can control these lower authority groups such as councils, school boards, parish councils. And they do an important job. And we need our people on them. I have seen reports, how true they are, I do not know, but I have seen reports where council seats go vacant because nobody stands. How easy would that be to become elected there in these places? We've never actually applied any kind of methodology to elections, so far as I know. As far as I know, no one has ever gone through the councils, and I'm talking about the UK here, methodically, to find out how many seats are lying vacant, how many could be challenged without much bother and become elected. I'm not saying take over the whole thing, but at least get elected. How many people have looked at the margin of success of people who are on the councils? So that you can then target the elections that you're going to stand in. That takes time, that takes personnel, that takes people who know how to work one of these computers, how to use it properly for research, for finding this stuff out, because it's all public knowledge. I did it for myself here. That's when I realized I was up against the odds. When I looked at the voting patterns. But it didn't stop me. I didn't expect really to get elected unless God intervened and helped me enormously. But if we had that methodology, if we had that discipline to do those kind of backbreaking, seemingly unrewarding tasks, it could make a difference. I think for too long, our people who have become involved in politics, I'm talking about after the Second World War now, have relied too heavily on the ideal, notice I use the word ideal, notion that if you're speaking the truth, people will vote for you. And that's patently not true. It should be, but it isn't. And because of computers, they give us the ability to gather the kind of information that we should have at hand. But as I've said many, many times before, this is what I can't do, and I can't do it by myself. I didn't know that. We used to shine up the rail tracks with brass on. Didn't know that. In nomine Patris et Filius Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Latin. My Latin's very rusty. Oh, you're leaving us, Skywalker. Okay. Hey, that can't be the time. Surely that can't be the time. It is. It's 11:30 almost. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've got 6 videos. Right, I need to bring something on. You need to see some of these. I'm sure that some of this is going to get a strike. I'm sure of it. Have a look at this, folks. I'll play it a couple.
Of this now. Regarding the COVID vaccine, the CDC is now saying that there has been enough cases of people who have had the vaccine, received the vaccine, and then suffered a stroke.
Can somebody arrest that chick from Fox? What a completely irresponsible thing to say. Clearly, the COVID-19 safe and effect booster shots, they ain't causing any issues. By the way, just kind of ignore that Lance Riddick died at the age of 60 the other day, and that meteorologist chick just keeled over.
She joins us live in the studio. Alyssa, this really is the calm before the storm.
Not again, no!
And then also turn a blind eye to this other lady at this news station, keeling over.
Jiménez Garrido se desmayó cuando trabajaba para el programa Lo Sé Todo, que se emite por el canal.
These are all completely climate change.
I should be prosecuted.
And we are just getting word of this now. Regarding the COVID vaccine, the CDC is now saying that there has been enough cases of people who have had the vaccine, received the vaccine, and then suffered a stroke.
Can somebody arrest that chick from Fox? What a completely irresponsible thing to say. Clearly, the COVID-19 safe and effect booster shots, they ain't causing any issues. By the way, just kind of ignore that Lance Riddick died at the age of 60 the other day, and that meteorologist chick just keeled over.
She joins us live in the studio. Alyssa, this really is the calm before the storm.
Not again, no!
No comment. I don't think any comments needed on that, to be honest. Let's see what else I brought on. There's a couple of nice things that I brought on. Let's get to them. I hope you enjoy this. I think this might get us a copyright strike, but never mind. Enjoy this.
There was a secret chord that David played and it pleased the Lord, but you don't really care for music, do ya? Well, it goes like this: the fourth, the fifth, the minor fall, and the major lift, the baffled king composing hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah.
You take care with what?
Hallelujah, hallelujah. I heard there was a secret chord that David played and it pleased the Lord, but you don't really care for music, do ya? Well, it goes like this: the fourth, the fifth, the minor fall, and the major lift, the baffled king composing hallelujah.
Good evening, yes.
Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah.
Isn't that a beautiful voice? Singing a beautiful song. Hazeldine is a Scooby. and horrid man in person. Oh, that is easy to accept. London water will kill your kettle. Well, some parts of England, the water is dreadful. I mean, it is just dreadful. Well, Steve, it's actually 11:30. I didn't realise that was the time. I don't think I'd been talking that much either. But there you go. Well, you should know, Treble M. London water gives you kidney stones, burrs you up. Now, I believe you. I do. I love my snowball fights at prep school. That and playing British Bulldogs. Fond memories, eh, Rory? You know, this is something that I've been trying to get a hold of for long enough. I have a water purifier installed. Every month I clean it, and the black soot from it cannot be natural. Of course it can't. Oh, I'm way behind again. I'm way behind the chat. Jeez, oh, where are you guys? You're way in front of me. Streaky. I went from asteroids to hemorrhoids in 3 decades. Now, don't forget, we've got the poetry live stream, second Friday. It's a 4-story house. You know, in the Old Testament, it says that collecting rents is actually a sin against God. That in the Old Testament, it says that every 7 years, all debts were nullified and people started again. You imagine that system, eh? I know, Treble, I know, I just realised that's the time. Oh, well, this evening's disappeared. Good evening, Linda. Hello, John and lovely chat. It's a rainy Saturday morning and I have just made my first cuppa and stirred up the fire, no doubt. Well, of course, that's true. Pressure drop saying, never forget that the government represents the people. And he's emphasizing the word represents has many meanings. It does indeed, sir. It does indeed. Scots Armour, you're getting awfully good at this. I don't know if you've always been that good at it, but you're certainly good at it. For God shall laugh at him, for he seeth that his day is coming. Psalm 37, stroke 13. I can't do that. We will always win. God will always win. It's a futile battle, but they will battle. That's their nature, these demonic entities. They can't do anything else. They hate us so. They hate what beauty is in the world, and they wish to destroy it all. All of it. Including us. Yeah. It won't stop. Because they've got a core amount of people that will go back, regardless of what's said, regardless of the outcomes. Yeah, beautiful voice, that, isn't it? Lovely. Lovely song. See what else we've got in our bag here. Have a look at this. I'm not saying this is serious, but it's interesting. Listen, you got to wait to the end for this one, right?
Beirut. Correct. What is the capital of Venezuela?
Caracas.
Correct. The capital of Trinidad and Tobago?
Port of Spain.
Correct. And finally, well, people are going to think this is rigged. For €10,000, what is the capital of the Republic of Ireland? The capital of the Republic of Ireland for €10,000.
Yeah, no. It's
Yes.
It's Cork.
Oh, I'm sorry, you've just lost €10,000. The correct answer was Dublin.
That's what you would think.
But you can still leave with something if you answer this bonus question. Which impermeable buoyant substance is commonly used as a wine stopper?
Rubber.
I'm afraid the correct answer was cork.
How would I know? Should I drink screw tops?
What is the capital of the Lebanon?
Beirut.
Correct. What is the capital of Venezuela?
Caracas.
Correct. The capital of Trinidad and Tobago?
Port of Spain.
Correct. And finally, well, people are going to think this is rigged. For €10,000, what is the capital of the Republic of Ireland? The capital of the Republic of Ireland for €10,000.
Yeah, no. It's
Yes.
It's Cork.
Oh, I'm sorry, you've just lost €10,000. The correct answer was Dublin.
That's what you would think.
But you can still leave with something if you answer this bonus question. Which impermeable buoyant substance is commonly used as a wine stopper?
Rubber.
I'm afraid the correct answer was cork.
How would I know? Should I drink screw tops?
Ah, dear. I don't think we're meant to take that seriously. I only have ever passed through London twice. on my way to elsewhere. The next movie is The Wanderers, set in the 50s. A kind of musical. A kind of musical. Music of the era, of course. Have they indeed, Switzerland, stopped the jab? No surprises, eh? Ian's dog is snoring. Jab for a biscuit, like the good doggy you are, says Bass. Yeah. Well, last time I was out in the evening, which was last year, I happened to, on my way to the restaurant, to meet up with my good Laura and Lorraine. I passed the town hall. Too difficult to explain how all this happens. And there's this queue outside the town hall, and I noticed there were people, more than normal, heading towards the town hall. Oh, must be a show on. Thought there was a show on. What did it turn out to be? It turned out to be people queuing up for their jag. Couldn't believe it. I never said a word, of course. What was the point? And they weren't all old folk, I might add. Don't think that. They weren't. Personally speaking, I'd have thought London would have been a good place to live in the 60s. See what else I've got here before I have to close this up. I came across this. I enjoyed this. I hope you all enjoy this, get the references, and I'm sure you will. I'll give it a couple of whirl rounds.
Doing your own research used to be called reading. Now you're shaming me for reading? At the behest of Big Pharma? It's like I woke up in the middle of a Bill Hicks bit. Well, looks like we got ourselves a reader. Tell me, boy, what you reading for? You know, before COVID, doing your own research used to be called reading. Now you're shaming me for reading? At the behest of Big Pharma? It's like I woke up in the middle of a Bill Hicks bit. Well, looks like we got ourselves a reader. Tell me, boy, what you reading for? You know, before COVID, doing your own research used to be called reading. Now you're shaming me for reading? at the behest of Big Pharma. It's like I woke up in the middle of a Bill Hicks bit. Well, looks like we got ourselves a reader. Tell me, boy, what you reading for?
I thought that was funny. I hope you did. We moved at the speed of science. Streaky, that stupid Welsh cow spokeswoman for Pfizer. We moved at the speed of science. What the heck does that mean? Budgie is saying, I met an old woman yesterday who said that she didn't take the jug. She was well onto the fraud. Wise. Yeah, absolutely good for her. And I can assure you, not that it makes too much difference now that she's dead, but had my mother had her own mind, or had she been in her own house, more importantly, she wouldn't have had the jag either. Because when I looked into it, and this is true, I'm saying it because my sister's not here. I didn't want my mother to have it. I knew that she had never taken in. That's part of the family way we do things. We don't take any of these things. But my mother didn't have her own mind. And when I said, well, what if I don't want that to happen? Now, me being the oldest son, I was technically the person who was supposed to make such decisions. And they told me that if my mother didn't take the jag, she would need to find another nursing home. But the other nursing homes all had the same policy. Now, this only came about after she had been given the jag. You can imagine my fury when I discovered that. And that's what I was told. That had she not taken it, she would have been forced to leave. And I can't imagine the upset that would have caused her. Because by then, we had given up our house. And had she come here to live, well, she would have been trapped in the house because she wasn't fit for the stairs that I've got. But anyway, that's another story. I don't know what you think of this woman. I don't think much of her myself. But this is an interesting little sketch that she's put together.
Or this. Or this. Or this. And one day, if you're very, very careful, little people, and you sit in the dark and you freeze your ass off and you wash your washing in water that's colder than my own piss, you might save yourself 5 whole p. Meanwhile, while you freeze your arse off on behalf of Ukraine or energy constraints or climate change or whatever bullshit excuse you buy into, BP and Shell made 23 billion and 32 billion respectively. The 5 largest Western oil and gas producers made over 200 billion cumulatively. China is still building new coal-fired power station, and Pakistan plans to quadruple its coal-fired power for domestic production. But just go grab a blanket. Why not do this? Or this? Or this? Or this? And one day, if you're very, very careful, little people, and you sit in the dark and you freeze your ass off and you wash your washing in water that's colder than my own piss, you might save yourself 5 whole p. Meanwhile, while you freeze your arse off on behalf of Ukraine or energy constraints or climate change or whatever bullshit excuse you buy into, BP and Shell made 23 billion and 32 billion respectively. The 5 largest Western oil and gas producers made over 200 billion cumulatively. China is still building new coal-fired power station, and Pakistan plans to quadruple its coal-fired power for domestic production. But just go grab a blanket.
So there you go, folks. At that point, I'm going to draw the live stream to a close. But before I do, I'll remind you that tomorrow night you'll get Sansom and Bonnie Ladd, and that around 10:30 Leo will get 42 on his live stream. And on Sunday, you'll get Toffee and Sansom. And I think William does live streaming on a Monday, and I'm back on Tuesday. So you're well covered if you want to get a hold of some live streaming content for yourself. If the weather's good, spend some of that weekend out enjoying what bit of weather you get. I am proposing to me out myself tomorrow. So enjoy your weekend, whatever you do. Oh yeah, and beg your pardon, yeah, thanks for that, Baz. You're quite correct, I missed them out. Ragnar and Jack will be on 7:30 on Sunday as well. So there's plenty of content over the weekend if you wish to watch all of it. And as I say, if you get any kind of weather at all, take a break from it at some point and enjoy the outside world. And we'll speak real soon, folks. So like I always say, adios, au revoir. Cheerio. I think it's Bonnie Ladd angle. Not sure. But I know they are live streaming. I've got a notification. So there's plenty of material if you want it. If you get a bit of weather, enjoy it. And I will speak to you on Tuesday, 9 o'clock. I've still got some paperwork to finish off tonight and get it in the post. And then I'll be out tomorrow. So, thanks all of you for being here. That includes the people who dropped out. And thanks very much for the moderators as always. Stay safe, enjoy your weekend, whatever you do, wherever you are. And I'll speak soon to you. Take care, folks. Bye just now. Enjoy the music. And I'll get out of the way.
Silently the snow falls, paints a winter scene, swiftly spreads the dark rim, hides a fading autumn green. Moonbeams brush the dark wood, conjure friendships dear to me. Lightly now the breeze flows, disturbing more than just the leaves. But life's much more than we can know. We are one small
Well, I'm hopefully going to go and see the girls tomorrow.
in the eternal flow. Patiently the love grows, lifts the weary heart. Gently now she holds me, melts two worlds once apart.
Hi there,
Moonbeams
Robert.
brush the dark wood, usher dreams of you and me. Softly then the breeze blows, disturbing more than just the trees.
All together now.
But love's much more
So much more
than we can know.
than we can ever possibly know.
We are one small globe,
But an important globe.
in the eternal flow. Melodies of long ago, songs of innocence, harmonies to soothe the soul, has some consequence. Moonbeams brush the dark wood, awakening joys of you and me. Silently the snow falls, bringing winter symphony.
All together now.
But we're much more
So much more
than we can know.
than we can ever possibly know.
We are one small globe,
But an important
in
globe.
the eternal flow. But life's much more than we can know. We are one small globe, in the eternal flow.
I think you like that line, Steve. Winter's Symphony. One small globe, that's us. But important glows, each one of us is. So you all take care. I thought that, Steve. You like that? So take care, folks, and I'll speak soon. So it's bye for now. Bye for now.